Hello, trampoline friends. Welcome to Trampoline Insight. I'm Nuno alongside Stephen Gluckstein, and this is episode 13. Today, we are joined by arguably the smartest and the most successful coach in trampoline history.
That's right. Today's guest has coached multiple athletes to become world champions and Olympic champions. He earned a degree in physics from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. He's the most decorated Olympic coach in trampoline history with 7 Olympic medals, including his athlete Rosie McLennan's 2 gold medals. He's also created his own trampoline equipment company called Rebound Products, which has been used in 2 different world championships. Please help us welcome the great Dave Ross. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Dave. How are you?
Well, it's nice to be here with the great Steve Gluckstein and the great Nuno Marino.
I don't know if we've earned our greats
ourselves,
yet.
You can all be great. Yeah.
So Dave, we know you very well. You have been around. Everyone in the world of trampoline knows you very well. We would like today to be a little bit more of letting other people know your history, your opinions, philosophies, who is Dave Ross, and how did it start on the world of trampoline and what age? That's what we would like to start with.
Okay. So you just want me to blab about that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I started in all sports at a late age. So even gymnastics I did in grade 10. It was compulsory at my school, and we had to do 45 minutes for 2 weeks or something like that. And I decided I liked it. I was really small for my age. I didn't grow till much later. So I thought, I'd be better at gymnastics and shot put because I was like 80 pounds in grade 10. So
Wow.
I did that and I liked it, but didn't even do 6 events till first year university. So that's not the normal age to start gymnastics. And then during exams in university, I didn't have time to train because I was busy cramming because I wasn't a good planner. And so I'd be cramming from university and it would be like, I'm going crazy studying all day long. I have to get out. And I would go to the gym and I'd bounce on the trampoline for about 1 hour by myself, like a maniac. And after about 3 weeks of that, I said, this is really fun. I like this, So wouldn't it be nice if there was a club where, you could learn moves and other people could do moves too, and that was in the back of my mind, like I'd like to start a trampoline club. But anyway, I went to my first trampoline meet because my gym coach said, you should enter the trampoline. You seem to like this, right? So I was already registered as a gymnast with the federation, and I showed up at the table where the trampoline was, and the guy says, I'm here for the trampoline meet. And I go, okay, well, who are you? Oh, I'm Dave Ross. Okay, well, and I was 21 at the time. Okay, so I said, well, are you a member of the gymnastics federation? Oh, yeah, I'm competing in the gymnastics. So I'm already a member of the federation. Okay, that's good. Okay, so, well, you can't just show up here. You have to pay the entry fee. Oh, no, my gym club paid the entry fees for me. No, not for trampoline. They didn't. Well, what's the entry fee? $2, right? So
$2.
I give him the $2. I slide the $2 over the table. He goes, wait a moment. You have to fill out an entry form, right? So I go, fine, give me the entry form. So I fill out the entry form, give him the $2, and I push it back over to the table. And then he said, wait a moment, you have to qualify. You can't just show up here. You have to go to a qualifying meet. Now I'm getting pissed off because he's like, what does all this red tape and shit, So I said, well, he said, well, like, what qualifying meets? So he told me where they were and when and stuff. I hadn't even been doing trampoline. It was like 3 months previously, right? So instead of saying, look, I wasn't doing trampoline, I said, look, if I had known about it, I would have been there, right? He says, okay, well, we don't have very many competitors. We'll let you compete, right? So I competed senior because I was 21, and I didn't realize that you could be junior in Canada at that time at age 21. So I competed at 21, and so then he says, well, and you have to be able to do the compulsory. I go, compulsory, what's that? He goes, it's a routine with set moves in it. And I go, okay, fine. What are they? He goes, I'm not very good at it. Ask one of the other competitors, right? So I found out what the compulsory was. It had a brandy ball in it, which was, fortunately for me, one of the hardest moves. And I was pissed because I'd learned it a week earlier. I thought I'd invented it, right? And then It was like, what? It has a name and other people can already do it? Shit, like, what do I know? I know nothing, right? Fine, right? So I get to the meet, and the meet was late, and they decided to run it the next day. So I had all night to cram and learn the compulsory. So I learned the compulsory, and then I showed up at the meet and competed and came 4th out of 4. And the other guys were doing complicated doubles and cool stuff. And I was like, well, oh my God, I'm out of my league. But anyway, during the warm-ups, they're talking to each other. There's this sneak entry, this Dave Russ guy. Who is he? Is he from the States? Is he like good? Like, oh my God, like, who do you have to compete against? Has anybody seen him? And they're looking around, and I didn't tell them, well, I'm the guy that can't do anything, right? So, so they were worried about.
What were the other guys doing at that time?
One guy was doing full and half out, and
okay.
Another guy, he did fliffus tuck twice in his routine, once twisting left and once twisting right, and he convinced the judges that it was a repeat. He also did 2 and 3 Randy Bullet at the end of his routine, which I thought was pretty amazing. I'd never seen that before. Anyway, so I came 4th, and they said, you know what? You're 4th. You're in the top 4. You get to go to nationals. Here's your plane ticket. And I go, what? Okay, this works cool. So within a year, I'd started coaching and competing, and then I kept dropping out of competing off and on, and then I'd get bored of judging and other stuff, and I'd go back to competing because it was more fun than just watching hundreds of people do the same stuff. And so off and on, I competed until age 42, which was when I did my hardest ED. And the last time I came out of retirement, it was to have fun and enjoy Skywaters, because I built a playground for athletes. I was damn well going to plan it while I was still young, right? Yeah. So that's, when I tried to do, I didn't quite get to 10 doubles. I did on Super Tramp, but I failed on regular, did 9. So that was my highest ED. Wasn't that good. But, I was always enthusiastic about trampoline. So for example, I heard about bungee belts from the Russians. We attach athletes to the roof with surgical tubing, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, well, that could snap. Like, that's stupid, right? I'm not doing that. And then I saw a tumbling coach, and he said, oh no, we use shock cord. It doesn't snap, right? And I thought, whoa, that's cool, So one day I'm driving in my $200 car, and I'm just thinking about it, and it's like, I could go to the hardware store and buy some bungee cord and tie it up to the roof with the existing ropes for the spotting belt, and we could have a bungee belt tomorrow. Turn around, go to the hardware store, get the bungee rope, right?
Nice.
Within 2 weeks, I'd been doing Galen Batovsky's routine and Brad Austin's routine and all these routines in the bungee belt that I could never do in real life, just to try them out. So it was pretty cool. So I was always an enthusiast about acrobatic sports and flying off the diving board or doing acrobatic things, but I didn't discover trampoline until 21. So it was a late start for me.
Mm-hmm. The bungee that you used, was that just a 2-point, or was that the 4-point that you made?
No, it was a 2-point. I actually invented the 4-point system. At one point, I'd invented the Super Tramp, and we didn't have anywhere to put it. Hadn't built Skywaters yet, and we'd set it up once in the summer, once every summer outside and bounce and stuff. And we didn't have index or anything, so it was a bit sketchy because it was 6 feet high off the ground. And
how'd you get up? A ladder?
You just you lift yourself up, right? Yeah, if you can reach something 6 feet high if you're 5'9", right? It's not very hard to get up. But yeah, I guess some of the girls, we had to help them up a little bit, the small ones. But anyway, I thought, well, maybe we could use the bungee, the Super Tramp as an attraction at a theme park by having 4 corners with bungees attached, so that people couldn't fly off no matter which way they bounced. They get pulled back to the center, and normal public could pay to get in this thing and jump. It would be like an attraction, of course, but I never did it. But at one point I wanted to build a 4-corner bungee system at a shopping mall that's 6 stories high that they have in Toronto.
You think people would go for that?
It's called the Eaton Center in Toronto. And actually, it's not even just 6 stories high, because at one point there's all these escalators and stairs, and there's an open space. It goes another 2 or 3 stories down. So you'd have 9 stories up, right? And it's a bit narrow. So
I would go on that.
You would go the long, narrow system, right? And then I figured we could have it at Christmas time, and you could have the Jolly Jumper, ho, ho, ho. And then once every, hour, you could have a demonstration with Santa Claus getting in that thing and doing some big tricks, right? But the regular public would be tied up with it hooked onto his shoulders. So no matter how hard he tries to flip, he can't make it over, and nobody can land on their heads, right? So it'd be just to jump really high and experience the thrill of going up in the air for the public and pay to do it. And
I would pay to do it.
Never did that
I'd pay to do that too.
I also jumped in a bungee belt that had, it was at Cirque du Soleil. They were testing a system for the Mystere show in Las Vegas there. And they found out that when the bungee was too slow, it was a bit boring for the audience. So they didn't use it. So they made it quicker. So I don't know if you've seen Mystere, but they come out of the roof and they fly off the trapezes and bungee down and catch the trapezes again. And because it's shorter, it doesn't come as close to the audience, but it's quicker, so it's more exciting, right? So anyway, when they were testing that, I went there because I was giving them some advice on one of their other devices that I built for them. And I got permission to put the trampoline under their four-corner huge thing that they built outdoors. So even though the cords weren't right, you couldn't swing tricks, you could do one trick at a time. You got 4 seconds of air time. Okay. Whoa. And the bungee at my club only gives 2.7, right?
Wow.
So the higher it is, the bigger it is, the more height you get. So, but it was really freaky because at the top of your height, you're looking down at the trampoline, which had no index, right? And the four corners center you back on the trampoline. But you look at it, it's this little postage stamp down there. You're looking at this thing like, oh my God, I'm stupid. This is crazy, right? But I did full Rudy straight, Miller straight, all in one bounce. So like a quad front with 5.5 twists.
Wow.
And I did a quintuple back with 3 twists, like back and float straight on the way up and back full tuck on the way down. So, because you have 2 seconds for each of the tricks on rising and falling, right? So it was pretty easy to chuck a whole lot of crap in only 15 minutes in the bungee belt there. So, between doing 100 triples in a bungee belt and opening Skyriders and trying to do stuff myself and coaching, I've been kind of a trampoline maniac for my whole life. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you get into coaching? When was it before Skyriders? And when you opened Skyriders, was it just like you said to make a playground, or did you have intentions of coaching this competitively?
Okay, first of all, I started coaching in 1972. I'd only been competing for less than a year. Okay?
Oh wow!
So
you invented the Brandy ball out, so you should be coaching.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. So anyway, I started coaching at a young age. So for example, in 1976, the World Championships were held in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay. And I figured if they're running a World Championships on the same continent as I live in, I'm going to go there to watch the meet and film it as a true trampoline lover. Okay. Even if I had to hitchhike there, I'm going to get there and I'm going to go. But it turned out that another guy was going down from Canada, from near where I live. So we shared the gas. And he had a car, so I didn't have a car. I was like a student, it's the bicycle, right? So I was pretty poor as a young trampoline coach, but by that point I'd been coaching for 4 years and had athletes I had the top team in Ontario, I think, but I didn't have athletes in the national team or anything like that. But I was one of the top 8 guys in Canada, and I wasn't in the top 5, so I wasn't on the team. But it turned out that they couldn't find anybody who was willing to coach the team because you'd have to take a week off work, and nobody could afford a week off work unpaid. So they were going to show up on the weekend to watch the finals, but they couldn't stay there for the whole competition. And I was going to be there for the whole competition. So they said, well, I can be the coach. So I got to coach at World Championships in 1976 because I was going to be there anyway, right? And there I saw this girl who competed 7 back out doubles in her routine. Ruth Keller had a Rudy in back out, a full in back out tuck, a full in back out pike, a Brandy in back out tuck, a Brandy in back out pike, and a double tuck and a double pike, 2 flippises and a Rudy out, I think, and that was her routine. And I thought, wow, if you could do a full down out of all those 7 tricks, you could be better. So I was teaching
Easy.
all my athletes, my girls, to do full, and half full. No one in the world was teaching that, okay? And it was even in 2000, I think, or was it? Yeah, I think in 2000 was Worlds in South Africa in 2000.
1999.
99. Yeah. Well, I think it was in 1999 Worlds. Karen had come off injury and was now competing senior for the first time at a young age, and she had tied the highest difficulty in the world with Karaveva, who had Randy out in half Randy. It looked like a half Randy then. It became more normalized eventually.
Yep. Yeah. It was half
Then it
Randy.
became a
still
Miller,
tell it
it
was
was a half Randy.
You could still tell it came from half Randy when she did it, but it was sort of a Miller after a while. But she did those two tricks and had the same difficulty as Karen, because Karen had half fulls and full fulls, right? So Karen was actually doing the same difficulty without taking any risk, right? And only after trampoline became Olympic did the other girls in the world start to copy us, because I had a girl doing full at Worlds in 1980. So by the time Skyriders opened in 1990, I'd been coaching for 18 years. I'd been experimenting on my guinea pigs for 18 years on what works and what doesn't work in trampoline. My athletes would sometimes say, "Are you using us as an experiment?" "Oh, no, this is just a new way of learning this trick," right? So, yeah. So I had this scientific method going for me, and I was interested in what the progressions work for trampoline, and what, after a while, it was like, once you know all the buildups and the progressions, it's like, these athletes aren't motivated enough. I need to learn some psychology, right? And then I was like, oh, okay, psychology not working. We need sociology. They have to have a group work habits and stuff like this. So a lot of things came slowly, but it was always a goal to produce good athletes. And so when Karen won Worlds in 2003, I think, in Germany,
yep,
that was my lifelong dream, was to coach a world champion.
And you achieved it.
Congratulations.
Well done.
That's
And
fantastic.
my Olympic dream was to turn on the TV one day before I'm dead and see trampoline in the Olympics.
Which you have achieved. Well, I think you probably haven't achieved yet, because you don't turn on the TV. You're there. So
yeah, well, it gets taped. But anyway, soon enough I won't be there. But
you have any plans you want to share with us?
I never expected to go there as a coach, right? And so I told my athletes before Sydney, I said, look, my Olympic dream was that. And so you guys have exceeded all my expectations. So it doesn't matter how you do. Like, we're all gravy. Don't feel any pressure from me to do well. You'll be under enough pressure from the media and your parents and everybody else, right?
Exactly.
Which of course happened. All the parents would, go win a medal for Canada. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm a 12 foot of 12, right? So like, Matt wasn't supposed to win a medal, right? He was the last guy that qualified.
So Dave, we already talked a lot about your coaching career a little bit. I just want, you didn't compete you weren't just an athlete for very long, but you competed for a while. So why don't you tell us a little bit, how did you learn new skills before all those bungee systems there? And who did you follow at the time? Who was that athlete that you saw that was like, okay, yeah, I want to be at that level? Or you were just different and said, okay, they do it this way, I'm going to do it that way?
Mostly I was different, but what would happen is that I would see something that someone else did, and I go, that's a good idea, I'll do that. So for example, when I was first starting trampoline, there was a belt in the building, but nobody to hold a rope at the other end.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't learn tricks in the belt. So I would put on a t-shirt, because I couldn't afford a wetsuit, and I would go off the 3-meter diving board and I'd try my moves into the swimming pool, because that was the only way to do it, right? So
yeah.
But it turns out
but you did have a belt then at your gym, that you just didn't have anyone to operate the belt with you.
Okay, I didn't have anybody to train with, I didn't have a coach, and I didn't have a person to hold the other end of the rope. Yeah.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Yeah. So I just, but sometimes I get one of the gymnastics athletes to throw the mat in, and interestingly enough, we didn't know that it was easier to throw the mat in from the side of the trampoline than the end. So we used to take
you were throwing it in from the index spot?
There was no index, right? Index hadn't been invented yet, okay?
Right,
So
exactly.
we would hurl the mat, we'd get a wave going in the mat so it wouldn't buckle in half and shoot it from the end down. It was just a gymnastics mat, like an 8-inch thick foam, soft foam mat, right? It wasn't a proper throw mat. So when I was at Worlds in '76, I heard from the German coaches that there's a special mats they make in Germany. Have you ever seen them? They're green, but a company in Germany made a thick throw mat. It was about 2 feet thick, and it was not very big, not much bigger than a small competition throw mat in terms of footprint. And this thick mat would be used for learning new skills. And so we don't use a belt very much. That's for beginner coaches who don't know the progressions. We just use progressions and we use mats. You know, that's how you learn stuff. Oh, really? Okay. Well, we need one of these. So this was another interesting exercise in my drive. Okay. I got back from World Championships '76, told the club, hey, we've got this new thing. It's a special mat. I'm going to build my own. I found out the material and the foam, and we can buy it. And we'll build a special mat for throwing into the trampoline for learning new skills. Of course, I wanted to use it as well. And but for my athletes, we're going to need this, and we need this mat because other countries already have it. We're behind, right? And they would say, well, yes, okay, that's good. We'll put it in the budget, and you can have it next year. And I would go, no, you don't understand. We're behind. We need it now, right?
We need it now. We need it yesterday.
Yeah, we need it a year ago, right? We don't need it like in 1 year, right? And they would go, yeah, well, we'll put it in the budget. You can have it in 1 year. So it's like, okay, screw that. I went and built it, bought it, had it in the gym, and a year later they paid for it.
That works. That's how I built the bungee belt. After I went to Skyriders, I saw your bungee belt, and I built one in Portugal, as similar as I could do it, and I could remember from memory, because at the time I didn't measure anything. I didn't do anything. So as I could do it from memory, and I built it in Portugal, and it was just like that. I put my own money in, and then whenever they were able to refund me, they refund me like a year later or 6 months later. So that was the same thing. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, I forget what I was talking about before I got sidetracked with the bungee, with the throw mats. But
tell us a little bit about your experience at WAGS.
Oh, well, okay. Okay, first of all, we were talking about me competing, I guess. And so I competed in Ontario, in my local area, regional competitions. And then I competed at nationals, I think 10 times. And I usually came in the top 3 because I was pretty good at coaching myself. Other people had coaches, but the coaches didn't know much either. But the top guys were always doing bigger tricks and stuff than I was, but maybe they started younger. But I figured that, maybe if I had started younger, I might have been better. But after coaching for a while, I realized that, I never jumped that high. Probably wasn't that good, right? But I've coached a lot of people with much more talent than I had. But I was pretty enthusiastic, and I did compete nationally quite a few times, and I competed internationally at the Hermesses World Cup for Canada, and I was qualified for Worlds in 1980, but the committee screwed me out of my position because I had no coach to be at the meeting where they discussed who got to go places and stuff like that. But I was pretty keen to coach my athletes, and both of them made finals at Worlds in 1980, so I thought it was worthwhile to not go. But the guy who got my spot came 17th, and if somebody said, you ever go to Worlds? Yeah. When? 1980. Oh, how do you do? 17th. Wow, that's pretty good. But there were only 35 competitors, and only about 22 who didn't fall off, or 21. So I would have been near the bottom, right? But I would have been a competitor at the world level if they'd let me go, right? Yeah. And I would have stayed on because I was good at staying on. But nice. I never competed at Worlds. Yeah. So then at World Age Groups, what happened was at one point they changed the age group, so there was maybe it was always no minimum, no maximum age, but it was the oldest age group was 18 and over, I think, or 17. I think it was 18.
Yeah, I think it was 18 and over.
18 and over. So I was 42. I actually competed at World Age Groups in '98, and that was outdoors in Hawaii. And there was this hurricane on the horizon, so there was this crazy wind blowing sideways across the trampolines, and the tumblers had to have about 10, 15 people holding down the mats because there was they didn't have anything under the mats that in those days, but they had 2 layers of mats, and the mats would flip over and disappear in the middle of a tumbling pass. So they had all those people holding down the mats. But on trampoline, when you were bouncing, at the top of my bounce, I'd be jumping into the wind, and the wind would push you back. And at the top of my bounce, I was over the frame pads. Okay. So that was a bit nerve-wracking, but I figured you could just figure it out and jump into the wind. But the better bouncers were over the spotter, and that was freaking them out. Okay. So I beat a lot of guys who I shouldn't have beaten, made it to the finals that year. So I was pretty excited about that. But so I was only 28 in 78, but in 92, I was 42, and I was just jumping for fun. But just before the meet during Worlds, I was getting bored watching. I was staying one day in the gym to watch all the countries compete, but there was a couple of countries that didn't know how to do trampoline that were warming up, and I was bored. So I went into the weight room, and there was a weight machine where it was like a bench press, but you sit down and you push the thing forward. And when I finished, I figured, oh, I'll just let go with one arm and then the other arm rather than use the foot paddle things, which can take a lot more. Your legs can take more weight than your arms. But it turned out that the thing went about 2 feet past your shoulders, where your shoulders go. So when I let go with one, it just hit my arm back, and I tore my tricep muscle. And so when I was jumping, every time I tried to bounce, my one arm would hit me in the head, and I couldn't jump very well. So I realized I'd have to do an easier routine, but I also realized that if I changed the routine the day before competition, I'd probably forget it, and then I'd still get in trouble and I'd mess it up. So I just started with the planned routine, knew all my substitutes, and ended up subbing about 5 or 7 tricks and finishing my routine and getting, a score, right? And you guys, I guess, looked up on your chart. I don't know, didn't do very well, but after I got back, what was it, 26th or something?
I don't remember.
Yeah, anyway, it was not very good, but there was a lot of competitors. So I was about halfway up in the standings, or maybe a little above halfway up, but pretty bad standings. But when I got home, my mechanic says, well, how did it go? He says, well, I competed and I didn't compete very well. He goes, yeah, but you were competing against this 18 and overs. There was some young guys there. How many guys are over 40 in the competition, right? And I go, well, there was only 3 of us, The other 2 guys were really bad, so I beat the other guys. He says, well, then you're the world 40 and over champion.
There you go.
And I go, yeah, actually, I'm the undisputed world 40 and over champion.
I know they changed the rules after
nobody's
that. Nobody's
disputing it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, in the States, John Cleese says, 3 reasons why Brits are better than Americans. And reason number 2 is that when we hold a world championships, we invite other countries. Okay. So in the United States, there's a lot of, world drag competitions or world, weightlifting competitions that are held in the United States, and no one from any other countries compete. And then now you're the world champion. So that was
like baseball.
Yeah, exactly.
The world champions of baseball.
World Series of baseball only in the United States. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff like that. So that was a pretty good joke by John Cleese, but yeah, I forgot where I was going with this. Oh yeah. So in boxing, they have these undisputed world champions, and it's mostly Americans, right? I don't know if anybody else competes, actually. I think sometimes there's a guy from Britain or a guy from South Africa or somewhere, once in a blue moon, but generally it's all Americans competing, and now you're the undisputed world champion. So I thought, calling myself the undisputed world champion was a bit of a joke, but it was kind of funny.
Well, it apparently it exists in America, so you're still the undisputed champ here, and your friends to the south.
Okay. I've also competed at the U.S. Nationals a few times, and I also supplied equipment to the U.S. Nationals. So we've been good friends with the Americans. In fact, when I was just starting trampoline, I would drag my kids down to Cleveland for meets on a regular basis and get them beaten by all the good Americans, so that they realize they're not that good once they came back to Canada. So that helped us a lot.
Yeah,
I wish we could keep that. Even nowadays, we could do more things with Canada. We're so close.
Well, you talk to your federation, because they don't allow non-nationals at their national championships. But
yeah,
I'm sure there's other meets where they do allow us, foreigners, Okay, so maybe if we can go to some of your other meets, but yeah, it would be good to have something like that. And actually, Germany and Great Britain had a long-standing history of dual competitions for juniors, and this is one of the reasons they're some of the two top countries in the world today, because they had an early history in the sport. And I thought that Canada and the United States, because of the cost of traveling overseas was so high, that we should have a dual competition between the two countries, where it's like the Canada Can-Am Cup or something, and there's a cup that you take home if you win, and it's like a team event between juniors and seniors or something like this. And it would be a big deal.
We should definitely do that.
It would be a big deal
for the junior team, something like that.
Junior athletes to make the team and represent your country and go. And every alternate year it's in one country, and every alternate year it's in the other country. And it could be hosted along with some other meets, so you don't lose your shirt, right? Sort of thing, like, you know, at one of the other major meets it could be held. And I've been, you know, asking the U.S. Federation to do something like, and the Canadian Federation to do something like that, and they always go, yeah, that's a good idea, and then nothing ever happens. So it never happened.
Hopefully Nuno and I can have enough influence to make maybe this happen.
Yeah.
So before we run out of time, because I still have a lot of questions that we probably won't be able to get to, but I'm curious about your coaching strategy nowadays, or I guess the past 20 years at least that trampoline's been involved in the Olympics. Your coaching strategy, you've had athletes break difficulty world records and always kind of been pushing the envelope. Is your strategy benchmarked against total scores or some score that maybe the Chinese or the Russians are doing, or are you just kind of have your blinders on and we do what we do? And if that's the best, that's the best.
Well, okay, first of all, there's a quote, I forget who it's from, but it's basically saying that if you pursue incremental improvements while your opponents are reinventing the wheel, it's like fiddling while Rome burns, okay? Or similarly, if you stop learning, you're falling behind, right? So I'm 70 years old. I'm probably not learning as fast as I used to, but if I stop adapting or progressing, we're just falling behind. So the world is moving fast, and if we don't change, we're going to fall behind, okay? So maybe we'll just fall behind because we were the first club to have a custom-built facility for trampoline 10 years before the first Olympics. So having that 18 years of previous experience before opening the club, by the time the first Olympics was held, I was a coach with 28 years experience. I already had athletes who were dedicated and focused and training hard, who in both cases, the Olympians had started within the first year that we were there. They had 10 years of experience on trampoline, 9 or 10 years of experience on trampoline before the first Olympics. And that's enough, like 7 years is enough to be good at trampoline if you work hard. So they had enough time to be good, and they had a coach with experience, and they had the best facility in the world probably. We no longer have the best facility in the world. Other kind of trampoline is Olympic. There's national programs. There's lots of good facilities. There's lots of knowledge out there. So we were early adopters of a serious program, and now there's many, many serious programs. So we're just one of many places in the world that are producing good athletes rather than one of the few places in the world producing good athletes. So of course, things are going to water down a bit, but you see the progress now is quite astounding. And so, you know, we probably have to be looking for a different kind of athlete to reach the level that you have to reach nowadays, okay? But my philosophy, you have to remember that when I started trampoline, the rules have changed many, many times, okay? When I started trampoline, difficulty was, your score was form and difficulty, that was it. No time of flight, no travel, and your form score was scored of 10, and your difficulty score was about 20% lower than it is now, because they weren't giving us much bonus for all the different positions and extra somersaults and stuff. So if you take your difficulty score now and multiply by maybe 0.82 or something like that, and add it to your form out of 10, difficulty was almost worth as much as form, or almost the same. So if you could do one more somersault and get 0.4 more difficulty, that was the equivalent of a lot of form, 0.4 form is hard to get, right? So basically it was all about difficulty. The guy with the hardest routine won, okay? And then they made form mode of 2, and then they made form mode of 3, and then they took one of the form scores and turned it into a travel score, and so on. So the rules have kept changing, but really form has become worth more and more and more for a long period of time. So I grew up at a time when difficulty was king. So I always thought, like, my philosophy of coaching is that number 1 is safety. Number 2 is technique. Number 3 is difficulty. Number 4 is form. And number 5 is style. So the big question is, what is technique and what is form? Okay, so to me, if it's something that's going to be hard to change later, like you guys have been coaching, right?
Yep.
If the athlete's doing a back tuck and the first thing they do is hurl their heads back to see the ground because they're panicking, which is a pretty normal human thing to do, you got to fix that because you don't want their back tuck to look like that when they're a senior. So you fix it when they're young. But if it's just pointing your toes or something like that, like when they're learning the trick, they have one thing on their mind, survival, and they don't have to think about pointing their toes while they're worried about surviving, right? So later, once they've been doing the trick for a year or half a year, now you make them do it with their toes pointed or kick out or other things. You go back and you backfill with the form later, but you get the trick first. So we try to get the difficulty up fairly young so that when they're older, it's something they've done before and it's no big deal. So, I mean, there are certain skills that are just hard to do because they're always hard to do, but there's a lot of skills in trampoline which for a beginner are really scary and hard, and for an experienced athlete are super easy. So for example, back somersault with 1 twist, okay? For an athlete who can't do it, it's just terrifying. You go backwards, you can't see anything, and while you're going backwards, you have to twist 1 time and somehow not die, okay?
Yep.
That's what? I'm not doing that, okay? But for somebody who can do it, it's just like, well, you kind of go like this and it happens, right? And you can see the tramp better than if you don't twist. So it's kind of like easy, right? And it turns out mechanically, it takes less energy to do a back full than a back layout because one of your shoulders drops on the inside and you save a bit of energy. So it's actually mechanically easier to do a full straight than a double straight. So certain skills are easy to do once you've learned them, but they're not necessarily easy to learn. So my philosophy was teach the skills that are easy to compete. Don't teach the skills that are easy to learn. So we were doing a lot of brandy down doubles and see the trampoline stuff as the large part of our routines for a long time before other people figured it out. I figured it out in 1978 that it's stupid to not land on your feet. So I stopped teaching athletes to do 1 and 3s and brandy bullets and randy bullets and things in their competitive routines 20 years before it became common at an age group level to only stay on your feet. So we were ahead of the trends by watching the trends, analyzing the trends. We got ahead of the curve on some things, right? By being
that's what makes you some of the best.
A follower of the sport, yeah. So I had all these progressions that didn't involve landing off your feet for all the routines, right from 1978.
So you still perform and learn all of these different elements to your stomach and back. You just don't compete them. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Or you don't do them at all?
You'll get, like, we went through a phase where there was a whole generation of athletes that couldn't do 1 and 3, even though they learned it. As soon as they stopped, once they learned to flip us, they stopped doing it because it was terrifying, and they would just, I don't do that. Like, why not? What if you have to bail? I just don't do 1 and 3. I pull around. I tuck tighter. I'd make it to my feet. Like, why, right? So now it's in the compulsory in Canada for one of the levels, and kids are learning it. And now some of them want to do it in their optional because it gives them more difficulty. I'm saying, no, don't go there. Do it in the compulsory because it's required, but don't compete it in your optional. But occasionally an athlete will do, for example, a Cody in their optional because they can't do the doubles yet, and they need to do more not non-inverted skills. Like if you have 3 brannies and 3 backflips, that's 6. That's your basis. That's your first year competitor. And then when you add a back full and a Rudy, you've got 8 skills. You know, double full's going to score horribly. They're not strong enough for double back yet. If they do 3/4 back Cody and those other 6 skills, they've got 10 skills. So, and it can be pretty clean. So sometimes we'll actually go off the feet just to tweak the rules for a given age athlete. But it's something we do as a sidetrack, not very often.
Wow, that's interesting. So I like to shift the conversation. Now we went from athlete to coach, now to equipment creator. So was 2007, the World Championships were in Quebec and we competed on your equipment. Was that the last time that you've had your certification for that equipment, or has it been updated since then?
No, well, okay, first of all, the FIG has a system which, according to the introductory paragraph, is intended to help the sport grow, right? But it's not. It's actually a tax on equipment manufacturers, which is designed to help the sport not grow. Because if you're an equipment manufacturer and when I was first, fighting the FIG to get, like, I supplied trampolines at Worlds in 96 as well as 2007, okay? And both times I had to jump over a crazy number of hurdles to do this, because they didn't really want us there. They wanted, the big boys to be there. And one of the comments was made to me by the FIT at the time, General Secretary, which was also Andre Geismuller. He says, well, we don't cater to the hobby manufacturers. Like, you little guys don't count. We don't care about you. Right?
You're just a hobby.
We care about the big boys, right? So and now, anyway, the procedure is that you pay your money to go get your equipment tested. So you ship it to Germany, the only place that it can be tested, and then they fail you the first time on a premise, like a fake premise, so that you have to pay again so they can make more money, and then or second or third or fourth time, but eventually you pass if you're persistent enough, and now you have the right to pay money every 2 years for up to 6 years to have your diploma. So you pay to get the test, then you pay to ship your equipment there and back, and then you pay to have the diploma. And during those 6 years, if you change one little screw on the trampoline, it's a different trampoline and it has to be retested. So once you've tested your trampoline, you can't change anything. Even if you realize, well, this one place, is the athlete might hit this, we should just sand that piece down and make it a little safer. No, you can't do that, because now it's a new trampoline. But it bounces the same. When you test it, everything will be the same. The force is the same. That little piece does nothing. It just gets in the way of the athlete. No, you can't change that, right? So the rules are kind of stagnating equipment, while at the same time, it's good that there's an actual test so that the equipment performs more or less equally. That's a good thing. But also, if you read the FIG books, 95-page document on equipment, hiding in one of the sections near the end is a statement that passing the FIG norms only guarantees that the equipment performs to the power or the specifications, size, and so on that are required by the norms, and do not say anything about whether the equipment is safe. So if you use FIG approved equipment in your competition, the FIG washes its hands of any liability whatsoever. You're on your own for any risk that athletes take using this equipment. Okay.
Wow.
So
do you know what kind of testing they put it through?
Pardon?
Do you know what kind of testing they put it through? If that testing is just for the norms, or is that testing involve safety?
The testing is for the norms, and it's a bizarre test. They take a ball, like we've done the tests at our gym. Okay. You take a 60-kilogram ball of a certain diameter that's round. So it's basically a steel sphere filled up with sand, okay? And you drop it from 4 meters, like the bottom is 4 meters above the bed. And then you watch it right in the center, and you watch how high it goes up on the first rebound, okay? And then there's another test where you drop it in different places. And those are completely irrelevant, because only 2 of the places where the ball lands do you have to pass an actual norm. So if the ball lands in the middle, it has to bounce within a certain range of heights, like let's call it between 85 and 80% rebound, okay? But the bed, when it goes down, has to depress between, let's say, 3 inches on the floor and 4.5 inches from the floor, or 2 inches from the floor and 4 inches from the floor, whatever the distance is, okay? There's a distance that the bed has to depress, and there's a distance that the ball has to bounce. So if the bed is too dead, the ball doesn't bounce high enough. If the bed is too powerful, the ball bounces too high. If the trampoline is too tight, the ball doesn't sink far enough. If it's too soft, the ball sinks too far, okay? So that's one test, okay? The next test is they drop the ball near the side of the trampoline, but forwards and backwards in the center, and it flies off the side of the trampoline. How far it flies off is within a certain range, okay? But where the ball lands is close to the edge. So the bed actually wraps around the ball, and the clips on the bed and the springs are actually touching the ball. So this is not a realistic thing that happens to an athlete.
Right. At that point, they would have their feet on the pads.
Well, athletes aren't as big as the ball. The ball is about, I don't know, 2.5 feet.
The ball is pretty big. I've seen it.
It's 2.5
inches. I was imagining like a bowling ball.
No,
it's a 60 kilograms ball. It's pretty big.
You'd have to make that bowling
kilos.
ball out of lead or platinum to make it that heavy. Okay, so this ball is about 2.5 feet, maybe. Okay, so most people aren't 2.5 feet wide. Okay, when their feet, like when the feet land on the trampoline, they're only about a foot apart or something like that. So you can land closer to the side and not touch the springs. You don't have the springs pushing on your body when you're doing a backdrop, I would hope. Okay, so the test is highly unrealistic, and that test was supposed to be removed, but of course they decided to keep it. But the biggest problem with the tests is that when they drop the ball, they have ropes attached to the ball because they're doing this in a gym, and they don't want the ball to fly off and hurt the gym or hurt the trampoline or hurt the people. So the spotter is controlling the ball, and if the ropes aren't slack enough, then there's huge errors in how high the ball bounces. So later they changed the test to say that the ropes have to be slack, completely slack on the first bounce, and then they can tighten them up to save the ball, right? You understand what I'm saying?
This is the most advanced testing that we have?
Yes, okay? And so it's super crude, right? So what we did at my club is we dropped the ball without any ropes on it, and we threw a big throw mat in, like we have an extra large throw mat that we sell for learning tricks. It's about a foot thick and it's big. And we throw that onto the trampoline for the second bounce, and the ball doesn't fly off, and it's saved in the middle, right? So it's not very hard to throw the pit in and protect the ball and not have it jump off on the bounce after. So what we did was we were getting tests with no ropes. And our tests showed that all existing passing equipment in the world failed the tests.
Wow.
But they didn't care because you are not important. You're just Dave Ross, and we are the FIG Test Institute. So go away. We don't care, right? But eventually, for example, I was thinking about retesting my equipment. I realized after Birmingham Worlds that the amount of money that was now being paid by the equipment manufacturers to be there at a pre-Olympics World Championships was too much for my company to pay. So we were not going to be able to supply any more World Championships, probably. Okay, so for a while we were like, no, we're just not getting another diploma, too much work. But then it was like, well, it'd be good to have it because people recognize it and so on. It's a good credential to have. So let's retest my trampoline. So we're going to go to do a retest. And at one point, the FIT was saying, you should come and do a retest with us. Please come and do a retest. They had changed the standards you had to meet and hadn't published them yet. So they were going to take my money and fail me, as far as I could tell. Okay, that's what their plan was, I think. But in any case, they changed the tests to make the ropes loose, and then they changed the height, the bulk and bounce, so that the existing equipment would now pass. Okay, but it's still a big scam because people have failed it. Like I know a tumbling manufacturer took their rod floor to the test institute, and they said that they failed the test because the rods broke. Okay, and the rod can only go down till it hits the floor. And they were taking the rods with a forklift and bending them 5 times further than that before they broke. So it was impossible to break the rods. And yet they were told that they failed the test because the rods broke. Okay, so there's a lot of weird stuff goes on there, and people just have to pay more money to get the certificate, right? So that's pretty annoying, right? But we plan to retest at some point in the future, but what happens is I'm changing equipment so quickly that I never have the final version ready. I don't want to test the almost final version because we want to change something else. So we keep improving our equipment, and faster than every 6 years, certainly probably every 2 years, we change something. And so we'd want to take the final tested version. The last time we got actually screwed because we cooperated with Eurotramp to produce a trampoline called GMU. And the part of the agreement was that they would produce it and I would not produce it, but it would be the combined trampoline, which we would sell. My company would sell it, their company would sell it, but they would produce it, okay? And every one that they produce, I get a small royalty, okay? So I wanted to take that trampoline frame and put it with our bed and springs and take it to the FIG Test Institute and test it. And Eurotramp said, no, it's our frame. You can't test it on your bed and springs. So we got screwed out of that, right? So the last time we tested, we were, screwed by our agreement with Eurotramp, I guess, but I'm 70 now, and maybe we never will approve our equipment, but we will keep making our equipment better. And actually, I've done a lot of research with Double Mini lately, and we've got an amazing Double Mini frame that doesn't fold, that doesn't give when you hit it, and we've got some amazing new springs. So the Double Mini hasn't been very developed. It's a pretty crude apparatus, and so there's room for huge improvement. Trampoline, there's still some room for improvement, but unfortunately, some of it doesn't meet the specs. And I forgot to tell you that part of the testing is they go around and measure everything. So there's like how wide it is, how long it is, does it meet the norms, does the frame pads hang over the bed by how much, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of measurements you have to meet, which are pretty easy to do if you know how to measure stuff. But the functional test is the part you get failed on usually.
Gotcha.
So Dave, you touch a point there that I really would like to talk about. So your springs, because I consider Rebound springs the best springs in the world. So why don't you get nerdy with us and tell us what is different with those springs?
And how come these springs aren't breaking and snapping?
That
right,
I can't tell you that because that's a proprietary secret in a sense, okay?
Coca-Cola, like Coca-Cola.
What I can tell you is that I've been working, my first product that I sold was a spring, okay? So I've been working since 1980 to make better springs. So we keep trying to make them better. And actually the first spring that I made, what happened is I wasn't planning to be in business at all, okay? What happened is we were tired of our springs breaking because they used to break more than the current batch of springs. The Nissan springs used to break really quickly at one point if you had a high-level athletes in your club. And sometimes we'd break 5 in one practice, okay?
Wow.
With 2 trampolines, right? We'd break 5 in one practice sometimes. So it was getting ridiculous. So I wanted to make a better spring that would last better. And I got together some friends, and because in order to order enough springs to get a cheap price, you need to order a lot of springs. So along with my 3 friends, we were going to order 4 batches of springs and have 4 sets of springs and use them so they would be better, right? And so I did all the work and did all the calculations, and I got some funny conversations with some of the spring companies. One of the guys says, you know, I would say, well, I want a spring that will stretch this far and do this and this and this. And they go, look, let me explain it to you real simple. We don't got no engineer here, see? So you bring one in and we'll make as many as you want, okay? The entire spring business is based on copying, pretty much, okay? So
that's why you don't want to tell us your secret.
there's not a lot of design and research. No, but later, at one point, I talked to one of my manufacturers and I said to him, and goes back to the same point, I said, what if somebody calls you up and says, make me a Dave Ross spring? I didn't have Rebound Products at that time. I was just running it by myself, okay? So my little tiny business, sort of my apartment, okay, with the springs under the bed, okay? So I say, what if somebody calls up and wants a Dave Ross spring? And he says, if they do that, we will tell them that that's a proprietary design that we have worked in conjunction with Dave Ross, and we cannot sell you that spring. But if they come in the door with one of the springs in their hand and says, can you make one of these? We're going to make it for him because he can go across the street and get it made by anybody else. So we're not going to lose the business, even though we can tell from the way the hooks were shaped and the little tool marks that it was made by us, that it's one of your springs. We will not ever, turn down the business, right? So the whole spring business is based on copying, and trampoline extension springs were invented long before I was born. So anything I'm doing is not patentable, okay? So what I do is I try to learn as much about all the ways to make the springs last longer as I can. And some of those things I will tell anybody who asks, okay? So for example, when Eurotramp asks me, why do you taper the end of the spring? Why is the end tapered, right? Why don't you just leave it square like our springs? Yep. I'll tell them, well, it turns out that when the spring is sitting there at rest, unstretched, and the athlete comes down from great height and lands with their foot an inch from the end of the spring, that spring moves out very quickly. And when it moves very quickly, we're not talking about landing on the spring and rupturing. I'm talking about landing near the spring, okay? When it moves very quickly, the end of the spring gets pulled faster than the middle of the spring because the middle of the spring is heavy and is slow to react. So the end pulls out first and the middle pulls out later. So there's kind of a wave that goes down the spring, right? And so during that moment, the end of the spring gets more damage on it than the rest of the spring. So you'll see some springs with a few of the little coils stretched out at one end. And that's because there's no taper. So if you taper the spring, the hook is smaller and the hook is stronger and less likely to snap, and the end is less likely to overstretch. So you should always taper your springs. So this is not a secret. They know this and they don't do it. So for a long time I thought, well, I'm pretty smart. I can make a better spring than other people can, right? But in some of the techniques that we use, I'm not advertising because I hope people won't copy them. But the truth is that my springs are a lot more expensive to make than other people who copy them who don't use all of the steps. But the reality is that nobody else wants to make a spring that good because they won't sell you another set every year.
Gotcha. Exactly. That makes sense.
Money, okay? So I'm the stupid guy who's making good stuff, okay? And
we love you for that, don't worry.
One of the reasons that, okay, and another thing I'll tell you about springs, which is not a secret, okay, is that normally when a manufacturer tests a spring for, say, the lid of a photocopier, you know it goes from 2 inches to 3 inches. And you can put it in a machine that will stretch it from 2 inches to 3 inches how many times, and you can design the spring so that it will have an infinite fatigue life, will never wear out. It'll last longer than the photocopier in that use, right? So because it's a simple design problem, the spring goes from 2 inches to 3 inches. But in a trampoline, how far does the spring stretch? Well, that depends where you land, and that depends how big the athlete is, and that depends if he's traveling sideways, and that depends if he steps on the spring or not, and so on, right? So if the frame pads go past the springs and the athlete doesn't step on the spring itself, how could you design a spring that would have infinite fatigue life? Well, you can do it. And my original batch of springs actually kind of did that, okay? But they were super heavy. So the bounce was crappy, okay? Because they were too heavy. So there's a inverse correlation between weight and performance. Lighter springs perform better, okay? But if you make the spring heavier, you might be able, let's say the spring is 10% heavier. Let's just make it simple. You could stretch it 10% further before it gets ruined, okay? Well, once you get to a certain weight of spring, 10% more means that it will last 100 times longer, because only stretching that far will happen 100 times less often, okay? So you can get quite a significant improvement in your spring life by making it a bit heavier. So our springs are about, I don't know, I think 15% heavier than most competitive springs are, because I want them to last that 30% or 40% longer. It's about, it's about 50% longer, okay?
I think that's a good thing about how many times are people transporting springs? You know, it's I don't think it's very often that they're being transported.
No, I'm not worried about the weight of carrying the box of springs into your gym. I'm worried about the athlete
weight going into the bounce.
And on the bounce, the bed comes up a little quicker if this bed, the springs are lighter, okay?
Got it.
But if the bed is a little bit lighter, you can make up for that because the bed moves a lot more than the springs. So there's other ways to get around that. Or if the bed has a little bit less air resistance. So we just design a bed that's a little hotter for our springs that are a little less hot, so everything lasts longer, right?
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so I think we got time for one last question. It might be a big one, but we have to ask. So tell us a little bit about your Olympic experiences. You've been to all of them. Which one was the most exciting? What was it? Your first medal? Was it your first gold? Your second gold? Right. So tell us a little bit about those experiences. What was exciting, and how did they differ?
Well, for sure, every Olympics is different, but there's no real comparison to the first one because we'd never been there before. We hadn't even been to any multi-sport competitions. We hadn't been to a Pan American Championships. We hadn't been to anything, right? So you go to your nationals, there's 200 people in the stands, a bunch of board people and some parents watching. And, you know, you can hardly even hear the applause sometimes. I mean, I'd run a meet in Kingston for 10 years where we filled the stands and had the audience go crazy because I was interested in promoting the sport long before there was an Olympics, but that's a separate story. But basically, we get to the Olympics, and it's huge. I mean, we had no idea. We walked into the stadium at the opening ceremonies, and we saw this 20,000 or whatever it was. I forget how many thousand people in the stands in Sydney, and that was just like mind blowing. Like what, you know? And even when we were there, like you're in the village, at the time, there were no newspapers coming from Canada to the village. There was no internet feed of what Canadian news media was saying in Canada. There was only the Olympic coverage of the events. I remember one night in the lounge where you could email people. I was up late at night, and there was a basketball game between the Dream Team and Yugoslavia or some unknown country, to me unknown country, but they're actually really good. And it was a super close game. And I'm watching it with no commentary. It's just showing the score and the players, right? It was a live feed from the event. And I was just like, oh my God, like these people are going to beat the Dream Team maybe. Like, oh my God, they're ahead by 2. Oh, they're behind by 2. They're ahead by 2. It was like, what? You know, it was like super exciting, right? So, but we were in this bubble where we had no idea what people were saying in Canada. And when in 2004, they started having the newspapers in the lounge with the athletes, you know, day 3, Canada has no medals, Canada sucks. Day 4, Canada has no medals, Canada sucks. Day 5, Canada has no medals, Canada sucks. Like we're getting all this negative press from Canada. It's putting pressure on the team, you know, like that was bad, you know. So it was really nice that Sydney was kind of like in a bubble. We would have no idea what we were doing, right? So when we won medals, we didn't know that people were going apeshit in Canada. We didn't, you know, we just came home and, you know, oh, really? Oh, all right. You know, it made everything seem smaller because we didn't know. I mean, we got there, we were told by the chief medical officer of the Canadian team, don't worry about bringing your medicine to the doctor a week before you compete and making sure everything was cool because you're just a demonstration sport. You won't get tested. Like, what?
What? A demonstration sport?
Yeah, that's what we were told by our own team. That's how below the radar we were, right? And like the National Federation office, Karen got a 3rd place at the last World Cup when all the Olympians were there, okay? And our own gymnastics federation said we didn't tell the media anything because it didn't seem to be a story there.
Wow.
Okay, you know, so nobody knew that we were good and that we were ready to compete when we got there. I mean, even Matt Turgeon, nobody realized how much he improved in the last year, right?
Wow.
So
you can watch the videos. You watch the videos of Matt doing his optional in the final, which was a really good routine. And you watch the look on Dimitri Polaris's face and you can read his mind. It's like, oh shit, I didn't think he'd be that good. You know,
Yeah.
he put pressure on Dimitri.
I guess you didn't think that Jai Wallace would be that good either.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, exactly. There was a couple surprises, right? And to be fair, something that happened in Sydney was that every athlete who competed in trampoline in Sydney had no experience at being in that big a venue with that many spectators, except for Matt. And I don't know what Jai Wallace's story, but Matt had done trampoline shows at basketball halftimes. Okay.
Yeah, I bet that would help. Yeah.
With Kenny Kovac, right? Okay.
Yep.
So with that show production group, so he had the experience of being in front of big audiences, and he liked a big audience. So he like, you know, hey, look at me, right? Like he liked a big audience.
Oh, we know that. We know that. Nissan Cup 2-3 competition. Yeah, we know that.
The 2-trick?
Exactly. So he was a showman. He liked an audience, and most of the athletes melted under the pressure, and he grew under the pressure. And so did Jai Wallace, because Jai Wallace was the home boy favorite. And when he just had to walk up to the trampoline, people went crazy, right? So he embraced that. He enjoyed it, right? He was a person who liked the audience being behind him. So it helped him, right? And a lot of the athletes were like, oh my God, there's so many people here. Right, they were a little bit more panicked, right? So the Olympics was a totally crazy experience in Sydney, and you know the other ones were always exciting in their own different way, but that one was the biggest experience for me for sure, because it was just so like crazy. I mean, one day on the way to training, the bus driver got lost. Okay, because he was just
I feel that always happens at the Olympic Games.
But he was this little guy, you know, he came from a little town where you drive past where the old tree used to be, and there's only 7 streets, right? So you know the way around, okay? And so he was lost. And I said, look, go to a gas station, get a map, I'll figure it out. And this is before the internet was on your phone, right? The phone was like a flip phone or something, or maybe we didn't have phones then. I can't remember, right? Yeah, I think we got the flip phones in Athens. So we didn't have phones, okay? So he's on his walkie-talkie talking to the guy about how to find his way back. And I'm listening to the instructions because I realize this guy's not too swift. And he passes one of the streets we're supposed to turn on. I said, you just missed it, right? Okay, I'll go back. He goes down the street, turns left, turns the bus around, comes back, turns left again. I said, you're going the same way. Oh yeah, right? Like, so we got to practice like 2.5 hours after our 2-hour practice was over, okay? And the next team said, oh yeah, great, come and train with us. There's only one of us here, right? So we just trained anyway, and everything was fine. But long before that, we'd had a discussion with the athletes, like, we don't know what we're doing here. Things are gonna go wrong. When they go wrong, don't panic, okay? Just deal with it, because you're gonna have to, right? And they didn't panic. Like, I was really tempted to just, at one point, the guy got out of the bus to ask some construction workers who also didn't know anything how to find the gym. And I was tempted to hijack the bus and drive it to the gym. Because
I wish that so bad would have happened.
But I didn't have a bus driver license or anything like that. And they drive on the other side of the road in Australia. So I didn't do it. But I'd driven before in Australia on the other side of the road. Yeah, but I decided not to do it. But everything was fine. Training went fine, you know, but they didn't freak out, right? Like, And some people would be, what, we have to train, oh my God, like the world's going to end, right? So it was very cool to see how calm they were. And I think our discussions ahead of time helped a little bit.
And so what a fast forward to 2012, right? In London, were you expecting Rosie to win, or were you guys expecting a medal? And how did that kind of play out in your reaction to finding out she won?
Well, okay, first of all, one of the really cool things about London was that we earned 2 spots. And, you know, leading up to not having 2 spots, you would think that Karen and Rosie would be enemies because we might be only 1 spot. Who's going to get it, right? But they collectively decided, you know what, we're going to earn 2 spots, and we want to have 2 of us on the podium. So they were super greedy in their dreams. Everybody has dreams, but they were super greedy in their dreams, and they were just like, this is what we're going to do, okay? And leading up to the Olympics, I used to ask some other coaches in Canada, do you think that Rosie's better than Karen yet? Or do you think the judges have realized that Rosie's better than Karen yet? And they would say, no, she's close, right? And so most people thought that Rosie wasn't quite as good as Karen. And in fact, I think in the prelims, Rosie was just behind Karen. Or maybe she was just ahead of her. I can't remember. They're 4th and 5th. But basically, they both played it safe in the prelims because they didn't want to not make finals, right? And so I think that hurt Karen because actually, if she'd been ranked a little higher in the prelims, the routine she did would have scored a little higher and she would have got a medal because I think 5 out of 7 judges scored her higher than Haywena, and she would have come 3rd. But because only 2 of the 5 judges' scores count, or is it 3? I think, no,
3.
sorry, yeah, 3. 3 of the 5 judges count. 2 get thrown out. The 2 reference judges don't get used. Those 3 judges ranked Haywena 0.05 higher than Karen. But if you took all 7 scores and averaged it, it was something like Karen was ahead by 0.2 or something instead of 0.05. It was quite a big difference. But you know, she almost got a medal. So we almost accomplished our goal. But Rosie was a bit of a shock because she basically seized the day. Okay, like every day in training when I timed them, Rosie always jumped lower than Karen. And in the competition, Rosie jumped higher than Karen. So Rosie was just willing to go pedal to the metal and do everything she had. And one of her fears leading up to London was that what happened to Karen would happen to her. Like she'll compete well, do her best, come 4th, and be forgotten. She could see that happening. Like there was a good chance.
I don't think anyone is going to forget Karen.
Yeah, but she got the other 3 medals before. Like she could have got 4 out of 4, right? She got.
Yes, she could have got 4 out of 4.
She came in the top 4 at 4 Olympics, but that nobody remembers that. If she'd come in the top 3 at 4 Olympics, that would have been something, right?
I'll remember that.
So you know, nobody wants to come 4th, no doubt, right? But so Rosie was just gonna leave it all on the line and do the hard, you know, as best she could, as high as she could, as clean as she could. And she nailed that routine. So it was like stunning, right? But then, I mean, Jason did the same thing in Beijing. He just got up and nailed his routine. You know, I was standing there with the mat. I'm watching the routine. I go, oh my God, nobody can do a better routine than that. Jason's just won the Olympics. Like, what the hell is that? You know, where did that come from, right? And then, you know, the judges gave him 2nd, but a lot of people thought he was 1st, right?
I think most people, I would say the majority of the world think that.
The popular
routine.
vote.
But
the popular vote would give.
But it's a judge sport, and if you haven't won any World Cups for the last 10 World Cups before that, you better, you know, take the hit, right? So that was the mistake in his case, is that he didn't have good enough results leading up to that amazing routine, right? Which is too bad, you know, for the sport. But anyway, yeah, Rosie's performance was stunning in London. It was like amazing, yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing. But unfortunately, I think we're run out of time. I wish we could sit here and talk for hours. And I think we could sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours. But we really appreciate you joining with us. We hope the listeners got to know you a little bit better, got to maybe definitely learned something from you today, and we appreciate that. And yeah, thank you a million times over. And we look forward to this quarantine ending and being back on the competition floor with you soon.
My word to the athletes out there who are chomping at the bit to bounce and the coaches who are chomping to coach, the time will come when it's safe to get back to the sport we love, and don't rush into it too soon, because there's still some risks out there, you know? So,
Yep.
so a lot of people are pushing to open things, but indoor sports is one of the last things that's going to be safe to do, because you breathe in the same space and you walk in the same space, you cough and the stuff falls to the ground, you walk, it's tracked around, as well as it's spread in the air and on the ground. So it's a very contagious virus, and we have to be super careful about not opening too soon.
Absolutely. And if that's coming from you, I think that's safe to, that puts people's minds at ease, because most of the athletes are chasing your athletes. So if now they know that you guys are taking this approach, I think a lot more coaches and athletes are willing to take that approach as well. So thank you. And I agree. Absolutely. I think we need to take care of our health first and foremost before any sport or any kind of business.
So safety's first,
Yep. Just like your philosophy. All right. Thank you very much, Dave. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
That concludes our conversation with Dave Ross. We hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about Dave and all he has to share. We love to hear your opinions and questions. Please reach out to us by commenting below or via email, trampolineinsight@gmail.com. You can reach us on Twitter @TrampInsight or on Instagram @TrampolineInsight. You can also send us a voice message with questions or opinions by following the link in the episode description. And we'll play it on the podcast and answer your questions. Thank you guys for listening, and we can't wait to see you guys on the next episode, and we look forward to giving away that free Veriflight.
Yes, we do. See you guys soon.